What's new and exciting, Joe Bulig?
What's new and exciting? I get to live stream from a park this weekend.
That is new and exciting.
Just not on any of my platforms. It's a church thing. But I've never tried to live stream outside of a dedicated building. So this will be fun.
Cool.
It means that Joe gets to get up at 4 a.m. and go set up tons and tons of tech gear for 4 hours straight before we do anything with it. That's what it means. Super fun. So that's what's new in Joe's world.
Nice. So that was the best question I came up with, by the way, for my follow-up on a different question instead of
nice.
how are you?
Nice work. Nice work.
I would say this one works about 80% of the time. You get an interesting response like yours instead of, I'm good. How about you? Which was the whole idea behind the action item in the first place.
Right. Yep.
A couple other ones that I was thinking about, which I don't think worked quite as well, but can be deployed tactically in certain situations, is everything okay? I feel that one kind of leads people into a more truthful, honest response, as opposed to just, I'm good, because you're sort of implying that maybe there is something that is not okay by asking it that way. And those were the two best ones I came up with. I tried some other ones like, what book have you read lately? I mentioned that one on air last time. Or what project excites you? What project are you working on currently? Just like picking out a specific thing that someone is excited about, the different versions of that type of question. But the one I landed on as the clear winner, I think, is what's new and exciting. You like it?
I like it. It's probably the better route to go than the route I've been taking with that whole thing, because I was trying to come up with like different answers to the how are you scenario, and every time I tried to come up with it in the morning, I only did this for about 4 or 5 days because it was weird, but you ended up like trying to come up with answers that revolved around your energy states without realizing it. It's like, I'm tired. I'm doing really well. I'm super excited today. I'm like, you know what I mean? Like you have these different energy levels that we talk about. It's like, I feel today. Like you'd come up with answers like that, and they don't really do much other than get people to just kind of look at you a little funny and like, really, why is that? And then they'd ask a follow-up question, and sometimes it led into something more than that. But for the most part, it was just a little weird. So I'm probably just doing it wrong. But energy states is not a good response to that question. So coming up with a different question altogether is probably better.
Cool. So the other item here for follow-up, and by far the coolest one, is this new bookworm rating website that Joshua had put together. Do you have a link that you could drop in the chat?
It keeps blocking my links when I put them in there, so no. I can grab one quick.
All right.
Send it to you. You can drop it in.
Sure. So this website is got a table of all of the bookworm episodes, and I kind of knew this was being worked on because Joshua had asked about the last episode where I had missed the ratings, so they didn't show up in the feed. And then once I got those and put them in, I kind of understood what he was working on here. But this is basically a list of all of the different episodes. It's got my rating and your rating, and then it's got the average of the ratings. So like Bittersweet by Susan Cain, I rated it 3.0, you rated it 4.0, so there's an average there of 3.5. And at the bottom of this, there is some bookworm trivia where it shows that, for example, out of 143 ratings, 18 books have been given a double 5-star. It's 12%, every 8th book on average, which is really cool. The most recent book to be awarded full stars by both Mike and Joe was 142, Yes to Life by Viktor Frankl, 4 episodes ago. Some really cool stuff here. Joe's average rating, my average rating. You're nicer than I am. Your average rating is 4.13. Mine is 4.1. Barely, but it's there.
Barely.
Yeah. And the biggest difference in rating is 2 stars on episode 98, The Crossroads of Should and Must. Were you surprised by that one?
I was. That one really stood out to me. That, like, I knew, like, if you had asked me what book I had rated the lowest, I think this is my lowest rated book. Mm-hmm. Is this the lowest rating on Bookworm, period?
Could be. Maybe Joshua can add that to the
He
stats
could
here
probably
too.
tell us the answer to that. Well, I mean, highest rated book isn't going to do us much good, but lowest rated book, I would be kind of curious. Nope. You have a 1.5 for Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Ah, yes. That's right.
Yeah. And then I've got the 2 for the Crossroads. But yeah, I didn't realize like the concept of thinking of the spread between your rating and my rating never crossed my mind as something that would be interesting to see.
Yeah.
But that is totally fascinating to me. Like there's some other stuff too here. Like I've rated books 5 stars 33 times. You've done it 30 times. We've given the same rating 57 times. Like it's kind of interesting how that's, I don't know, stats that I never totally would have expected to come up with. But I guess this is what happens when you come up with 146 data points for somebody to play with. So there you go.
Yeah. So this website is very cool. Thank you, Joshua, for putting this together. I'll have a link in the show notes if you want to check this out. This is great. I love the fact that he put this together, and this is a continuation of a project that had started several years ago by Andrew Pfeiffer, I believe. Joshua mentioned in the Bookworm Club that project had been abandoned, so he kind of rebooted it with this website, and this looks great.
I feel like we should put in a redirect for this or something, like a bookworm.fm/stats or something that takes you here. Is that out of line?
I'll let you.
I don't know.
I'll let
I
you
feel like we
handle
should
that.
do something with it.
Whatever you want to
Totally
do,
gonna do that.
is cool. All right, so bookworm.fm/stats. That's the URL we can use.
Yep, I'm totally gonna do that when we're done here.
All right, you heard it here, folks.
There you go, Joshua. Thanks for making this. This thing is sweet. I absolutely love this. The data nerd in me is just ecstatic. So yes.
All right, but I think that is it for follow-up. So you ready to talk about today's book?
No, but we should do it anyway.
I'm wondering why you are so hesitant to talk about this one. This is, I am curious.
I've been hesitating on this book since we got on this call, even before we started recording. So there's that. This will be fun.
All right. Well, today's book is Hero on a Mission by Donald Miller, which maybe that's the part that is surprising to people, because Donald Miller has kind of been all over the place with his literary journey, and he kind of gets into the reason behind that in this book, which is kind of meta-fascinating to me. I first discovered Donald Miller from the book Blue Like Jazz. That's, I'm guessing, the first place you heard of him too.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Which was a religious book. And then from there, he pivoted and kind of became the business strategy guy and came out with StoryBrand, which is the big thing I would argue that he is known for, although he does a lot more with that now, with like Business Made Simple and Marketing Made Simple, all that kind of stuff that is an extension of that StoryBrand. Now, I am familiar with Business Made Simple. I'm also familiar with Marketing Made Simple. I actually have access to the Business Made Simple course, library thing, whatever. When I was working with the family business, we were doing some StoryBrand stuff, and we had signed up for the StoryBrand course, the thousands of dollars one. Got to work with a StoryBrand coach for a little while when we were redoing our website, and that kind of morphed into the complete catalog of Donald Miller's training. So I've gone through some of it, but I got to be honest, I'm not a real big fan of that stuff. And the reason is I feel like it is overly simplified. I am probably just, again, not the right person for this kind of stuff. For someone who is, an entrepreneur and has never really had a grasp of why their business is broken, and it feels like everything is really hard. There's probably a lot of clarity that can come from some of the simple models that he uses, like your business is an airplane and these are the engines and this is the wings and stuff like that. Like that metaphor though, like it was overly simplified in my opinion. So it never really clicked for me. And I expected Hero on a Mission to be business made simple for your personal life. Is that kind of what you were anticipating going into this as well?
That's what I was hoping for, yes.
That's what you were
So yes,
hoping
that was
for.
definitely the trajectory I expected to get, yes.
Interesting. Okay. So the beginning of this.
Mike's in this mode where he's picking my words apart already.
Yeah, I am. So the book is broken into, I guess, 3 different sections, although part 3 is really just the templates that he talks about. So there's an introduction, which is where we'll start. But before we get there, just how this is put together. Introduction, Act 1, how to create a life of meaning. Act 2, create your life plan. And then Act 3, which is all of the templates and things. So let's get into the introduction here. Now, the introduction started off really shaky for me because he shares a lot of his story at the beginning here. And a lot of his story is essentially, I was a jerk. And this is his words, not mine. I'm not trying to project anything on Donald Miller at this point. He is very self-deprecating, especially as he talks about where he was 20 years ago, living with the guys in the house and them having to have an intervention because he's projecting blame onto all of them. And he's like, I was not a good person to live with. So he starts out by basically saying he's been playing the victim card for a long time, and playing the victim has affected the quality of his life. However, from there, he starts talking about Viktor Frankl and logotherapy. I was curious, when you got to this point, did you fall off your chair like I did?
I honestly, so I was reading this at 5:45 in the morning. I woke up early that day to start this book. I didn't wake up in order to start this book. I woke up early, so I started the book. Woke up at 5:15, blah, blah, blah. The thing that happened was at 5:45, I was to that part where he got to Viktor Frankl, and I set the book down and I looked out the window. The sun was rising. I was like, this is going to be a weird journey. And I went and made a cup of tea and I went and sat down and then I continued. So it was enough of a jarring moment that I had to stop what I was doing, go grab something to drink and come back.
Yeah.
Haven't had that very many times reading a book. Gonna just say that.
So
it was very strange.
Viktor Frankl, the author of Man's Search for Meaning and Yes to Life, which we mentioned, we were looking at those stats, probably the only author who we've reviewed multiple times and never given anything less than 5 stars would be my guess.
Yep.
Big fans of Viktor Frankl. We've talked about that in those other episodes, so we won't spend too much time revisiting that. But Viktor Frankl is the one who survived through the Nazi concentration camps and came out with logotherapy as a way to compensate with what make sense of what he had just been through. And so he was kind of working with people who had been through the same sort of thing and find meaning in all of the pain and suffering that they had gone through. Not look for pain and suffering in order to bring meaning, but we had to go through this. We did. Now, how do we turn it around to use it for good, basically? So there's an interesting detour right at the beginning. And I actually have in my MindNode file, after 10 years, made a system/planner. And I put in a red flag emoji because I wanted this to be the point where this is where I started to see things go off the rails. It's important to know, I guess, before we get into the rest of the book here, that there is a planner that goes with this. Now, in the book, he provides the printouts of the actual planner pages. There's also QR codes that you can use and I think you can access these for free online and print them out if you want. But there is also a product associated with it, which he frames as it's a couple bucks a month in order to cover the hosting costs. It's $10 a month or $100 a year, so it's far exceeding the hosting costs. And like I said, I'm familiar with the other Business Made Simple stuff. I have no interest in this web software at all. I don't think that's going to detract a whole lot from the conversation that we'll have, but you do need to recognize at this point in the book that he is selling something. He's a business guy.
Yep.
I don't fault him for that, but I kind of expected at this point that everything he's going to talk about is going to be filtered through use my system. It's not exactly what happens here, but the software that he's put together and the sheets that he has, they're kind of guides that you can use to apply some of the principles that he's going to talk about if you wanted to do it that way, but you can apply it your own way as well if you want to.
Did you get into the software at all? Did you buy into this to find out what it is?
I didn't I went to the website. I saw the pricing. I did not sign up for a trial or anything because I'm not interested in it in the least.
Yeah, I don't think there is a trial, but I think when I got through, so I picked up the book and was like flipping through it at the very beginning, how to read a book. You flip through it, see what the thing's about before you actually sit down to start reading it. It's impossible to do that and not catch that there's a QR code at the beginning and at the back and at 5, 6, 7 places throughout the book as well. The same QR code is in many places. If you go to that link, there's a whole bunch of go download now or whatever it is, get the online tool, whatever it is. You go through that. It's like many, many, many times. And then you finally click on one and it takes you to the payment page right away. And whenever I got there, I realized, oh, this is a sales thing. But I had done that before I had started reading the book, which meant that I knew before I ever started reading that this book was a sales pitch. And that framed the rest of the book for me, which was not helpful, because then it told me that I had paid to read a book to sell me something, which never goes over well in my mind. Like, it just seems very strange. So anyway, it rubbed me the wrong way. Like, I get that, like, you can still get a lot of good out of this. You don't have to go through his course or whatever it is that you're going through. You can get it downloaded for free at that URL, but you have to pay attention very specifically to what you're looking at, because it does it's a little deceptive as to where the free part is versus the paid. So it's a little strange. And yes, you can use the stuff in the back of the book, but it's printed so small that you actually can't really use it.
Yeah.
Unless you write really small. So you'd have to copy it and blow it up. All that to say, that's a business move for sure, like to try to sell that. So I get it. It's just a little frustrating to me.
I'm not surprised by the approach of selling the online software. What I would have loved to see him sell instead would be like a digital planner that you could put inside of GoodNotes or something. I feel like that's the logical in between here without having to
or
have
even like a physically, like a notebook.
Yep.
Like,
that was the other things, like a Michael Hyatt approach, full focus planner
Right.
sort of a deal.
I could totally see that. Yep.
I could see something like
software-
that happening. Well, yeah. So I think I don't fault him for making the choice to go software instead, because I've seen specifically like goal setting software, life mission software, and having those things be able to tie together. That could be kind of cool. Is it $10 a month cool? Not to me, but
No.
So I knew this was going to be there. I didn't scan any of the QR codes until I was done with the book, because I wasn't going to implement anything that he was talking about at the beginning. And also everything that he outlined here, I actually created a version of this for my faith-based productivity course. So I went into it thinking I'm going to just understand the thought process behind what he has designed to see if I want to make any modifications to what I had created. Now, I don't really even use that anymore because I use the fancy pens and the blank page, and I do create the time. But as I was thinking through this and thinking about the thing that I had made back in the day for faith-based productivity, makes me kind of want to go back and take a look at that again. I've still got my Remarkable, and I think maybe I'll experiment with modifying that template and putting it inside of there. I think using Remarkable would be more enjoyable for me than using an iPad for that. My iPad I use for very specific things. Sketch notes primarily at this point, which
Sure.
by the way, did you see the sketch note I made for the next book we're going to cover?
I did. I even grabbed a like of it, so I have a download of it to hold on to that.
Hey, thanks.
It's pretty slick. I have not started our next book, but I have it in hand. It showed up a day later than it was supposed to, so prime. But I have it. Super excited about it. That'll be fun.
We'll get to that in a bit. But yeah, so software versus planner, I can see why he took the approach that he did. I am not going to sign up to make sure to verify whatever that those things are connected as powerfully as they can be using online software, but based on the other Donald Miller stuff that I have access to via online software, I'm guessing that it's not.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say. And even if it was, it's not worth $100 a year to me. I didn't have the visceral negative reaction to that though, that you did. I knew that was going to be there. And like I said, I put the red flag in the ground because I expected that was going to be the anchoring point for everything he was going to talk about. But maybe it was just because I had in the back of my mind, well, I've kind of done a version of this already with faith-based productivity, but I didn't feel like he was pushing me, other than the QR codes at the end. Obviously, those are pointing back to the system that he's made, but I didn't feel like it was simply a sales pitch for the planner. And that resulted in me getting a lot more out of the book than I was anticipating to at this point in the introduction.
Yeah, I want to point out one clarification to what you just said, and that is that having finished the book, I don't feel like the book was a sales pitch in its entirety. That was my perception once I figured out that he had this product, because I figured out all the pricing and what the product was before I ever started reading the introduction. So that was my perception before I got into it. I just want I want to make that clear.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that is the impression you're going to get at this point in the book. But let's get into the actual content here. So the first part, they're not actually called parts in this book. They're called acts, which is kind of in line with the whole story brand thing, a play, whatever. So I actually kind of like that approach. Act 1 here is how to create a life of meaning. And there are 6 chapters in Act 1. I do not have all 6 of these in the outline. Maybe we'll get into something from each one of these. I don't know, though. I kind of just grabbed a couple of bullets on the big themes. Chapter 1 is the victim, the villain, the hero, and the guide, the 4 roles that we play in life. Chapter 2 is a hero accepts their own agency. Chapter 3 is a hero chooses a life of meaning. Chapter 4, what elements are necessary for a person to transform. Chapter 5, a hero knows what they want. Chapter 6, a morning ritual to guide and direct your story. So the first chapter, the victim, the villain, the hero, and the guide, this is the thing to understand for the rest of the book to make sense. It's the basis of the title, Hero on a Mission. So just real briefly, let's define these 4 different roles. The victim is the person who surrenders their life to fate. The villain is a person who makes others small. The hero is a person who is willing to face their challenges and transform. And the guide is the one who helps the hero on their journey. The guide is the one that I attach to being familiar with the StoryBrand framework, because StoryBrand is all about your business. Like, who are you trying to help? That's your customer. They're the hero and you are the guide. So when you get into designing your website and your messaging and things like that, you want to create empathy and you want to exhibit authority, but it can't just be all about you. It's all about the problem that your customer is facing. Were you familiar with StoryBrand going into this, and did you have the same sort of thought about this, or what were you thinking at this point?
Yeah, so I'm familiar with StoryBrand. I have a half completed work set for it at the moment that you and I were going to go through at one point, and that never happened. But so I have that I've worked through. Completely honest with you, I've not read the formal set of it, but I've been around it enough, I feel like, to understand it to some degree. This might be a case of like GTD, where like I read enough around it that I thought I understood it, and then if I went and read it, I wouldn't actually understand it. Like, it might actually be the way it is, but anyway, all that said, like I get the concept of building the story, building your brand around that story. As far as like these 4 roles, uh, I think it kind of depends, like me personally, what I identify as. It depends on what arena we're talking about. Because I know that I float from thing to thing, which is not abnormal, right? But as far as like one specifically that I find myself identifying as all the time, I don't know that I really have one that I feel like I sit in all the time, regular or most of the time, I should say. But I get the concept at least.
Okay, so yeah, the story brand framework is actually really well put together, I feel. And I became aware of this when I was at the Entre Leadership Summit down in San Antonio, and Donald Miller presented there. He had just kind of came out with this, and I think it's like a 7-part framework. It's really easy to understand, which is why it's so effective in terms of helping businesses create their marketing narrative. And just real briefly, it starts with a character, that's the customer, and identifying what they want. That character has a problem, and so you identify the external, internal, philosophical problems they're trying to overcome. Step 3, they meet a guide who understands their fear. That's where you exercise empathy and authority. Step 4, that guide gives them a plan, so you summarize whatever plan it is that your product or your service is offering. Step 5, calls them to action. So the hero has to do something. There's a direct or transitional call to action that results in ultimately success or failure. Here's what it looks like if you take action and your situation changes. Here's the tragic results of failure if you fail to take action. If you just continue to leave things as they were, for example, and then use all that to create like an identity transformation for the customer from something to something. I've filled this out dozens of times, and every time I do it, it's really, really effective. It helps you think through things. It connects very, very easily. And the net result is you don't give your customer, the person who's landing on your website or experiencing your marketing message, a whole big message that they have to unravel. Donald Miller uses the analogy of giving customers like 8-pound bowling balls to carry around with in terms of like a lot of online messaging. So you want to make it as simple as possible for them to understand and resonate with whatever you're trying to help them achieve. And then remembering that you're not the hero in this journey, they are. So now, hero on a mission, we've got that guide and hero again, but now it's all about you. And he's applying it personally. And I did not expect this to transfer well. So at this point, when he's talking about these 4 different roles, and I feel like I understand what he's going to say already about 2 of them, I am very, very skeptical. However, I do like how he is saying at this point, we need to take responsibility for writing our own story. We talk a lot about personal responsibility and self-determination on this podcast and a lot of conversations that we have. And that's kind of what chapter 2 is all about, is agency, the ability that we have to make our own choices. And so I am hopeful that this message that he's going to share here is going to resonate with me, but recognize I do have this bias of this story brand that I don't think is going to translate real well to an individual's perspective at this point.
Yeah, this is where like him trying to make that transition to do the translation of story brand to a personal life, because I caught that right away when he started to do that as well. I was like, okay, this is where he's going with that. But there are components of it that I feel like it worked well. There's some spots where I'm kind of, what? Like, hold on. So there are some of those, but all of that aside, like you were talking about in chapter 2 here, where it's a hero accepts their own agency. Like this one really struck me because there's a lot of like little one-liners in this section that I found super interesting and super helpful. One of those comes from page 21. But some people mistakenly believe that because they cannot control some characteristics of their lives, they cannot control their lives at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, that is so true. Like if you tend to have like one little area that's spiraling out of control, that doesn't mean you've lost control of absolutely everything. That just means there's one little thing that's got out of your control. Like it's not your entire life is going up in flames. It's one little small thing needs corrected. So I think that is something that comes up regularly. But again, like he has a lot of these little tidbits in here. So I don't want to discount. I know I've kind of been naysaying already on this one, but I do want to point out like there are some really good points in these sections, this being one of them. And there's a handful of these I'll point out as we go through, but I did appreciate that. Like that there is, like, if you come at it from a hero stance, if you use the story concept, if you're going to be the hero of your story and you're going to take ownership of the actions that come that you need to make, you have to keep in mind, like, you are in control of that. Like, you're the one that decides what you do every day. Like, you may have other people telling you need to do certain things, but it's your choice to actually act on them or not. Now, the consequences of not following through on that might be quite severe, but if you're okay swallowing those consequences, that's okay. But you're still the one that's making the decision to do what someone else has asked you to do, or to decide what it is you're going to be doing. Thus, you're the one that has the control. So that's that particular part. Like, I really appreciated him making that point here.
Yeah, there are a lot of one-liners like the quote you shared from page 21 that I did not expect to come out of Donald Miller's mouth.
Yeah.
There's a lot of wisdom that he shares in this. This is the point where he is really kind of leaning into the hero's journey metaphor. And I will say at this point, I'm not positive that is going to work. But I think the further that we go in the book, the more I come around to that. Some important elements of that, which he kind of talks about here. Chapter 2, he introduces the idea of the narrative void, which is the restlessness of sitting in the theater of your mind, waiting for something to happen. That's kind of how he puts it. When one story ends, another story needs to begin. And chapter 3, on page 32, he says, some of my saddest, most depressing, can't get out of bed experiences have come in the season following a significant accomplishment. His significant accomplishment that he's telling at this point in the book is riding his bike all the way across the United States. And I know exactly what this feels like. I won't retell the whole story here because I know people are sick of it, but running my first half marathon, hurt myself, crossed the finish line. What do I do next? I felt that void. I know exactly what that feels like. I was hurt at the time, so I couldn't fill it with something else, at least, another running goal. So I feel like calling that out and forcing us to deal with that is important. And also, he's planting the seeds here for the whole idea of goal setting, why it may or may not be such a great idea. Put a pin in that one. We'll get to that later.
Yep.
But he also talks about Frankl's formula for a life of meaning in this chapter. And again, he kind of comes back to this all the time. So take action, creating a work or performing a deed, experience something or encounter someone that you find captivating that pulls you out of yourself. Have an optimistic attitude towards the inevitable challenge and suffering you will experience in life. And uses that kind of at this point as the foundation for everything else that he's going to share, which I feel like was a very positive move. I understand citing Viktor Frankl at the beginning. And at that point, I'm thinking maybe that was a mistake. Maybe we've read a bunch of Viktor Frankl stuff. I've studied his life outside of those books even because I find him fascinating. So I was completely expecting him to misinterpret some of the stuff that Viktor Frankl had talked about. And usually that stuff doesn't pass the sniff test for me. I can see when someone's trying to just shoehorn something in there because of the name associated with it. But I feel like what he did with Viktor Frankl's ideas and logotherapy, because he says that he kind of experienced this himself and that's the thing that gave him hope. I feel like that's authentic. And I feel like he shares these little tidbits very well. And so this is kind of borrowed credibility at this point because it's Viktor Frankl, but I feel like Donald Miller does a good job with this.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Especially this section here specifically of like when you've completed a big goal, then what? Like what's the next thing? Like that's almost dangerous territory when you've succeeded at something big. Like I specifically think about last summer we did our big remodel on the house, And when we got done with it, we specifically decided we were not going to be doing any major projects on the house or on the property over the winter just because we knew we needed a break. What I was not expecting is this massive void of boredom and exhaustion, overwhelm, all of that coming on as a wave after completion. Like, we've moved in, everything's good to go. Like, we can kind of just take a step back now, and that hits hard. It really can, and it makes it kind of difficult to like get yourself going again, unless you have like I forget the term he had for it. There's that, what did you call it? Narrative void.
Yep.
When you don't have that mission, that story that you're working on. So you have to come up with the next thing. But I don't think it has to be in the same arena necessarily. Like, that's where the whole goal setting thing comes in, that he's going to pitch, and I'm sure we'll have a fun conversation about. But he's got the whole, like, once you've completed one, go on to the next one. Don't get like, yes, it's good to take a break, it's good to rest, it's good to celebrate, but go on to the next one. And he nails this, I think, with some of the backing he provides with Man's Search for Meaning from Viktor Frankl, in that he is talking about, like, you have to have that drive, that meaning, that purpose, or there's nothing to live for. Like, there's no point in continuing, thus the depression that can set in after success. So you have to like shift your gaze forward to the next thing, or you're in dire straits very quickly.
Yeah, he says that meaning comes from motion, which I thought was a very profound statement.
Yeah.
And you could just talk about that for another 20 pages, I feel, but he didn't.
Yep.
The idea, though, is really powerful. And he also shares the idea of the existential vacuum here, which, again, he credits Viktor Frankl for this, but this fits perfectly with this narrative void that he was talking about, because the existential vacuum is where we feel like life should be better, more fun, more rewarding, more fulfilling. It's that whole idea of the gap where you think you should be at this point and you're not, and you measure the distance that you have to go and you get frustrated because all you see is how you're falling short. And the opposite of that would be the gain, where you measure where you are versus where you started, and that produces motivation to keep going. But really, it's having that meaning, that life mission, life theme is what I call it, your purpose statement. Why are you here? You know, if you have that, you can reverse engineer the projects that you're going to work on and the daily actions that are going to produce the meaning for you. I have nitpicks maybe with the way that they're framed if you're talking about goals, but the idea is the same, and it's accurate, I would argue.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So the next idea in here, starting in chapter 4, what elements are necessary for a person to transform? Now, he's talking about transformation through the whole hero's journey. You were this wimpy little character who was scared of everything, and at the end of it, you're the hero who does the thing, and everybody thinks you're awesome. So that's kind of what he's talking about with this transformation. That's the seed that's planted here. But I think the more powerful idea behind this, and I think he kind of starts to speak to this, but that was the idea I had going into it. Transformation is not an overnight thing. You don't just snap your fingers. There's not a single event that helps you go from 0 to 100 or from victim to hero. The truth is, and this is what he is kind of communicating at this point, is that we are actually always transforming. We are always changing. He even says humans are designed to change, and when we don't, it's an indication that something is wrong. And I love that. I mean, one of the things I've adopted with the whole faith-based productivity thing, starting to get into YouTube more, and I'm trying to end my videos with that: keep going and keep growing. Like, I want that to become my tagline. Essentially, don't ever give up and constantly be looking to change. Figure things out, try something new. You're going to mess up, you're going to fail. You know, he kind of talks about that throughout this whole section here, is that failure is actually where you learn. Failure is an opportunity for education, is how he frames it at one point. And heroes have to engage their challenges. Very Ryan Holiday-esque. The obstacle is the way sort of a vibe going on here at this point.
Yeah, this whole transformation idea is, like, you could take this the wrong way. Like, if you think of like some of the hero movies, there's an event that takes them from a nobody to superhero overnight, right? Like what you were saying. Uh, it's the little things that add up. We've talked about this before. This is why the habits books always do so well, and we always get excited when we have conversations about routines and habits, right? And whenever we look at those little things and the repeated actions over time, it's that continual progression that leads you to great places. Whether that quote unquote great place is, success as you would see it in the public eye, or if that is success in the sense of you made an impact on your kids' lives in a positive way, which is no small feat, I want to point out.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're able to say that you've succeeded in that, then you've done well. But it's these little transformational habits and these little things that do add up over time that lead you to that. I mean, the big things can happen. Like it can be a big overnight thing, but that is easily the exception, not the rule. And I wish it was normal and you could just call that into place. It's like, okay, tomorrow I am done being distracted at all the little things. I'll be focused 100% from here on out. And there's something that would cause that. I would imagine if I asked for a raise of hands, everybody would raise their hand asking for that to happen. But that's not going to happen. So it is these little things that you have to dedicate yourself to that add up over time. Is this the part where he was talking about the writers that showed up on a dedicated writing schedule every day?
I don't
I don't remember
remember.
if this was that part.
I don't think that was at this point. I think that's probably in Act 2.
Okay.
But
sometimes I get those things mixed up.
yeah, so Act 1 really is kind of big picture stuff. And then Act 2 is the specifics, and kind of the last part here in Act 1 is a morning ritual to guide and direct your story. So it's planting the seeds for the routines. He shares his morning ritual, which includes reading his eulogy, reading his 10-year, 5-year, and 1-year visions, reading his goal-setting worksheets, and filling out his daily planner page. So I'm sure we'll get into that, but before we move on to the next part, I just want to call out a couple other things I liked from this. That he says in Chapter 6, a life plan is not about productivity, but it will make you more productive. Love that statement. That is, I agree with that 100%. That he said that better than I could have possibly done, but I've tried to say similar things regarding like the time block plan for the day and the intention that it provides. We had a follow-up item for you several shows in a row to see if that actually, clicked. What did you think of that quote there?
It's a good one.
Did it resonate with you?
That,
Did it make you want to plan your day every day, or in some way, shape, or form? Not time blocking specifically, but
yeah, I mean, so here's okay. Let me explain this one. So I've started to figure out why some of the time blocking thing hasn't clicked for me, and it's because I didn't realize this until I read this book and got through the part you're talking about. But I kind of do a pseudo plan for the day anyway, and have for quite some time. But I don't think I could have told you that that's what it is.
Sure.
Like, I would have told you that, yeah, I make a list of things I'm trying to do today. Like it's a checklist of things I'm setting out to accomplish today. But the part of that isn't captured anywhere is my mental plan of when all those things are going to happen. Like
yeah.
it's not a plan in the terms of like this hour, this is going to happen. And then this is going to take 30 minutes and this is going to take 2 hours. Like I don't do that, but I know that if I'm going to write this particular article, it's got to be done this morning. If I'm going to go run these errands, that's going to be right after lunch. And I know like if I'm going to do any form of like administrative maintenance tasks, that's going to be right before I go home. I have all of that plan in my mind, but it never gets externalized anywhere. And I think it's because I know that my schedule tends to change so much day to day or like hour to hour.
Sure.
That trying to write it out doesn't seem to make sense, but I know in my head when those things are best going to work out. and then I shoot for that. So I think that's what some of my angst with the time blocking is like I have kind of a plan already and have done that for quite some time, but I don't think I could have told you that I'm doing that. It wasn't until recently that I was able to connect that that's what I'm doing. So yeah, yes, he does get into like this whole ritual of, make your plan for the day and stuff like, and I get that. So I've been like answering these questions of myself in the morning, which is kind of similar to what he's getting at. But as far as like the hourly time blocking thing, I don't think I'll actually ever get to a point where I'm fully like writing that out every single day and thinking that's super exciting. Like I don't think that's going to be me.
Sure. And I think Donald Miller would say that's okay. Because
sure.
he actually says in the Daily Planner section in Act 2, which we'll get to in a minute, that the Daily Planner page, you could fill this out every day if you want, or just on days where you need additional focus, which was surprising to me. Everybody I know who has professed a system is like, you got to do this every single day. He's kind of like, I just use it whenever you want.
Right. Which I absolutely loved, and I'm not used to people saying that, which is why when he said it, it's like, whoa, hold up.
Yep.
What? You're a guy who has a set of worksheets and a system here, and you're telling me to maybe use it sometimes when it's helpful? Like, who are you? You're strange.
Yeah. So this is,
but I'll take it.
This is like the seeds of, these are the principles, and take them and apply them how you want. If you want more structure in order to help you apply them, I've got this thing that you can use. And I think he's kind of okay if you decide that that's just not for you.
Right. Right.
It's interesting. And then the other thing here with the hero knowing what they want, this feels selfish at first, but he kind of addresses that. He mentioned that the sweet spot is the things that benefit us and others. And he does a really good job of defining that, what that looks like. You can't just be in service of others. You need to have something that's in it for you. Otherwise, you're gonna lose motivation to keep going. But also, he talks about asking the question, "What if?" And I like this question. I've asked versions of this question in the past, but this is one of my action items. Like, what if I did the thing? What if I wrote a New York Times best-selling book? Because that's the thing on the bucket list for me, right? And I want to start asking this as a filtering question. That's kind of the idea he talks about here, is having a theme. Life theme is where my mind went. Every story has a controlling idea or a theme. And that theme serves as a filter. So you're not trying to do everything. You're trying to do the right things, but kind of encouraging you're capable of more than you realize at this point. You'll never get it if you're trying to live the life and the story of other people, or that they want you to live. You have to define that for yourself. But when you focus in on a specific thing because it's really important to you, because it's going to help you and help other people, then that creates motivation to consistently do it. And that's really cool, and I think very exciting as you go into the next part here in Act 2.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good segue. Let's go to the fun part here.
All right. So Act 2 is create your life plan. And right there, it's in the title. You kind of know what he's expecting us to do with this section of the book. Chapter 7 is a eulogy allows you to look back on your entire life, even before it's over. We'll come back to that. I just want to go through the rest of these chapters real quick. Chapter 8 is a good eulogy, talks about who and what the hero loved. Chapter 9, a good eulogy helps you find narrative traction. Chapter 10, write your eulogy. Chapter 11, create your long-term vision and short-term goals. Chapter 12, a hero gets things done. Chapter 13, the hero on a mission daily planner. Chapter 14, the role that matters most. Chapter 15, the story goes on and on. So lots of chapters here. Several of them come before the actual writing of the eulogy, which I loved.
Yeah.
So the term eulogy, you probably, at least I did, instantly thought of Stephen Covey and the 7 Habits, right?
That's not what I thought of.
Well, habit number 2, begin with the end in mind. I guess maybe that's just my upbringing with the family business, and my dad has a whole like self-determination product built off of that principle as it pertains to goal setting. You know?
I'm around funerals too much. Like
Fair
I
enough.
instantly thought of the worksheet we have here that helps you write one. Like that's
Sure.
that's what I
Well,
instantly thought
going
of.
into it and seeing all these chapters about a eulogy, that's what I anticipated is okay,
Yeah.
so we're getting into life, purpose, mission, statements, stuff like that. We're probably going to come back to Stephen Covey, Seven Habits. I know this already, Donald Miller. You don't need to talk to me about it for 4 chapters. That was me at the beginning of chapter 7.
Yep.
However, he won me over with this section. He did a really good job of talking about the eulogy in a new light. I don't. He probably brought up Stephen Covey at one point. I didn't jot it down in my notes here, but
I don't know that he did. I don't remember
maybe he didn't.
seeing that name.
There's definitely a lot of new material here on this idea. So don't write it off, even though at the beginning it probably sounds the same as we talk about it. But essentially, a eulogy, what legacy are you going to leave? And he has a couple of exercise questions in each one of these chapters, which is a very effective way of doing this because he doesn't just give you all the questions at once. In chapter 7, you have to identify, I will likely pass away when I am about X years old. And if I die when I am X years old, that means I only have Y years left to live. This is very wait but why-esque. Have you ever seen one of those calendars?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, they're humbling. I'll say that.
Yeah, so the calendar I'm talking about basically has the average lifespan, and then you color in the squares from the moment that you're born to the day that you die. And the whole idea behind it is you see all those boxes that are colored in, and you're like, oh my gosh, my life is half over or whatever. And it's very sobering when you you look at that.
Yes.
However, this feels very stoic, memento mori sort of a thing. Remember, you're going to die. What you do with that is the important thing. And I feel like he does a really good job of saying, okay, well, I'm probably going to live to be about 80. I'm 40 now, then I better get busy. And it creates the momentum or the motivation to take action now and start creating the life that you want to live. One of the interesting things, because he shares a lot of his own personal story throughout this, is that he kind of got a late start. He talks about how he bought this chocolate lab, Lucy, and started traveling around the country with Lucy. And he thought at that point, I'm in my mid 30s. This is the only companionship I'm ever going to have. And at the end, he talks about how now he's married. They just had their first kid. Lucy is going to die soon. So one story's ending, another story's beginning. I don't want to jump right to the end, but it's a very effective metaphor. When I read that last chapter, I mean, I have a dog named Lucy. Maybe that's part of it. But I went through this not too long ago with our previous dog who passed away suddenly, and then we ended up getting another dog. But I found myself getting emotional as I was reading that last chapter. And he does a really good job, I feel, of communicating like, well, yeah, you should be emotional because the story is ending, but don't just stay there. Like life keeps going. Brings in Viktor Frankl again. Like this is the perfect mashup of all these different things, all these different ideas that we read, in my opinion. And then he tells it through the Donald Miller lens, which is kind of self-deprecating, kind of humorous, sometimes trying to be funny, not so funny. He's got, one kid who's a couple months old. So he's talking about explosions of love and explosions of poop. I've been through it with 5 kids. So like that doesn't work for me, but I know you going through it for the first time, exactly how fascinated you are by this. However, it doesn't translate. But overall, I feel like all the different dots that he's connecting with this, very, very effective. And the eulogy is the thing here that I feel this kind of anchors a whole bunch of stuff. I want to write my own eulogy. That is an action item that I am going to commit to. I'm not sure if I'm going to share the whole thing on the air next time, but I'm definitely going to write it.
Yeah, I think that's a noble task to take on. I think a lot of people should do this. I'm very grateful that he took the 3 chapters to explain basically what makes a good eulogy. Like I mentioned earlier, it's like one of the first things I thought of was the eulogies that I read whenever we have funerals here at the church. And some of them are written very well, and some of them are lackluster, to be kind. And there have been, I think, 2. One in particular I know stood out to me, but there have been 2 that I know I've read that were written by the deceased, one of which was written as they were on their deathbed with the help of their family, which I found very emotional and difficult to read. The other one I'll bring up just because it fits this very well. The deceased, they died early. They were in their late 50s. They wrote their own eulogy in their early 20s. And that eulogy was inserted as part of the bulletin rundown, whatever you want to call it,
Wow.
the handout that came at the funeral. That was placed beside the eulogy that was then written by the family. And to see the 2 side by side was just mind blowing to me.
How'd they match up?
Very well, actually. It was shocking because what had happened was he had written this eulogy in his early 20s and then basically did what Donald Miller is talking about here, where he was talking about, or he was trying to live his life towards that end goal. There weren't any specifics like, I'm going to have a big business. Like, you don't, like, none of that was
Sure.
part of it. It was all relationships, which is a lot of what he's getting at here.
That's chapter 8. Yep.
In what makes a good eulogy. I have no idea how this person like came about the concept to do this, but obviously they came about it somehow. And to see the family's response to reading that, because a lot of them didn't even know that he had written it. It was just a super fascinating experience to have. I waited till now to bring this up because this makes perfect sense here, but absolutely, I'm going to join you in trying to write this because I feel like this is something that can definitely drive a lot of good in your life as far as a mission goes. But I also know, like, this is not going to be simple. Like, you know this. Like, this is not going to be a fun or exciting process by any means. But I think Donald Miller has set us up well with understanding what makes a good one and giving you the framework to help you get through this to do it well. But yes, it's one that I'm definitely going to take on here.
Yeah, he does give a lot of great examples of people who have written their eulogies. He shares I think he shares his wife's, like a whole bunch of other people's, a couple of paragraphs. These are the sort of elements that you would include in it. There's even a whole bunch of questions that he gives you in chapter 10 with writing your eulogy. I'm not going to read them all, but they are in the MindNode file. So I guess there's a plug for membership if you want to get access to that stuff.
There you go.
I like the section about people and relationships, how they give us meaning. He mentions this drama triangle in chapter 8, which is interesting. Because if you just take that statement at surface value, yeah, your life should be about other people, you could totally get sucked into this. And I've seen this manifest, but I didn't really understand how you get there necessarily. Basically, he did a really good job of defining this. So basically, this drama triangle is when we interact with someone who sees themselves as a victim. The person positions themselves as a victim to attract a rescuer. And then the rescuer swoops in and makes themselves feel good by helping the victim. However, the victim has no desire to actually change. So when the rescuer's patience starts to wear thin, they begin to blame and persecute the person they were attempting to rescue.
Who then needs a rescuer other than their original rescuer, and on we go.
Yeah, so this is kind of like a false hero, I think, at this point. Like, you could find someone who has a need and who is trying to get attention this way, but that's not that's not going to provide the meaning. You're going to fall into this trap. So he says, heroes on a mission attract other heroes on a mission. Really, you gotta find other people who are like-minded, not in an echo chamber, but people who are at least trying to and believe they have the agency to change their situation. If you get around people like that, then that will inspire you to change yourself, and it's a reinforcing, perpetual cycle at that point. He does also make the point here that when others are involved in our stories, we have to make compromises. He talks about how he had to make compromises when he got married. He had to make compromises again when his daughter was born. And at that point, I'm like, buddy, you have no idea.
You just getting started, my friend.
Yeah, and I don't say that because my family has cramped my style or anything like that. Just with each additional person, you've got less and less.
Yeah,
you've got less and less agency for yourself, and you willingly trade that because a story that involves other people is more meaningful. But yeah, he's kind of talking about it with his first kid, who is a couple months old, and framing it as this requires a huge amount of sacrifice. And when you have 5 kids and they are 14 and under, that requires much more sacrifice. So I'm very much aware of this problem, Donald Miller. I don't need you to explain it to me. That's just me.
Yes. At the same time, though, there are many people who aren't even to his point.
Yep,
so
yep.
It totally makes sense. What he's saying isn't wrong for the stage he's in. And I think he's got a good viewpoint given his starting point there. He's coming at it probably from a better place than what I was at that time in that season. So kudos to him on that front. But yes, absolutely. Yeah. 2 kids is way more complicated than 1, 3 more so. I'm done at 3. You've got 5. I don't even want to think about it, Mike. Like, I'm good at 3. I'll stay there.
We, let's see, probably 4 or 5 years ago, we bought a Suburban, and we went into the dealership, and we're talking to the sales guy. Actually, it was 4 years ago, because Adelaide is 4 and we had 5 kids. And my wife and I walked in. We didn't have the kids with us. Well, we need a bigger family vehicle. Okay, so how many kids you got? And I was like, 5. He's like, 5? Pardon me for asking this, but are you planning on having any more? Just because that determines whether you need the bucket seats or the bench.
Right, the vehicles. Sure, that's what you're thinking about. Yeah.
Yeah,
like,
but you could.
What's wrong with you?
You could tell his mind was blown at that, and then. But that's all right. There's another thing in chapter 9 I wanted to talk about here, with creators, not consumers. So this is one of the things that we have tried to make a mantra in our family, is create, not consume. It's one of the things my wife and I talk about all the time in the Intentional Family podcast that we do. I've even got on my iPhone home screen the Widget Smith thing with the text at the bottom that says create, not consume. So whenever I open my iPhone, I see that as a nudge to not just go check Twitter or whatever, but do something that I consider to be a positive use of that technology, and just intentional technology use is what I'm trying to go towards. So I love that idea from the perspective of intentional technology use, but I also think it fits really well with what he's talking about here in terms of narrative and story, because he says creators make things that didn't exist before, and a life plan and a life vision and ultimately a life well lived could fit there as well. Consumers consume what creators create. So somebody says you're going to do this and you end up doing that, and then you complain because it's not what you wanted to do. Right? So creators create, consumers consume, and then they complain about the things that they've consumed because really they should be creating themselves. But they don't do it because, I don't know, there's a lot of different reasons. But I think one of the big ones is that they're waiting for somebody to give them permission to do it. Consider this your permission. Permission granted. You can create the life you want. Don't wait for somebody else to give you the ability to do that. start where you are with what you have. You don't have to change your entire situation overnight, but do something to move in the direction that you want to go. Whenever you let other people define your world, they're always going to make it too small.
That, and if you're waiting, like you go back to Act 1 where we're talking about the hero's agency. Like, don't wait for the perfect circumstances either. Like this is something I've been bad about in the past. Like, well, I can't start seeding the grass until it's just right. Like, well, the perfect time to seed grass is in the spring and in the fall, right? Yeah, but I have the time midsummer. So like it's not perfect. It's going to take more water, but I'm not paying for water. It's just a well pump. I don't pay for the water. So water it. Who cares? Like that's my view now, but previously I've always waited for those perfect scenarios, and if you're looking for absolute perfection, you'll never find it, which means you'll never act on it, which means you don't get anywhere, and you'll always be complaining because you didn't act on the thing that you think you should have done, and now you're sitting in a wallowing pit of nothingness. So please stop, get up, do something. Here's your permission to get going.
And this is also where helping you to realize that you're running out of time is actually can be used for the positive, I'll say. No one likes to think about the fact that they don't have a whole lot of time left.
Right.
But when you realize that, it does create urgency to start living your life now. And in chapter 9, he talks about page 114, he says, every day we write a page that someone will someday read. So kind of to your point, don't wait until circumstances are perfect because they're never going to be. Start tomorrow and write the page of your life story that is in alignment with the story that you want to tell. You're picking up, if you're embracing these ideas that he's talking about, every single one of us is embracing a story in progress. And the tendency could be, well, I want to start at the beginning and I want to make it perfect. But you can't do that. You're jumping in the middle and you've only got so much time left. So I feel like that is a very compelling argument for just starting where you are with what you have. And so this character in our story, maybe he's made a whole bunch of mistakes. That's actually a good thing from a storytelling perspective because it's going to make the comeback that much sweeter and the triumph that much greater. Okay, so this character who has made all these mistakes in the past wakes up today and is you. And what is the thing that they are going to do, the best version of them is going to do today to set up this storybook ending? I feel like that's a really cool visual exercise. And that's kind of what he's talking about in this chapter, is developing this vision. There's different ways that he talks about this. The 3 characteristics of a good vision: it should probably embarrass you, it should probably scare you, and then says, oh, by the way, it should also be realistic, which that was kind of jarring. You know, he embraces that. He recognizes that. He's like, think big, dream big, and then, oh, by the way, now make it realistic. I feel like the embarrass and scaring part, that's kind of just like priming the pump. But then the realistic is a very effective way for like, okay, so what can you do now, right? You don't have to have it all figured out. You can't go from 0 to 100. What can you do right now to start moving in this direction? But then the other thing that was really effective for me was he talks about how the choices that he and his wife are making and the life that they're creating, that is establishing what is normal for their daughter. And so one of the visions that they have is this retreat center sort of a thing. They call it Goose Hill, where they have people come, and he has these bookshelves in their carriage house, which he wants to fill with people's life stories and their hero on a mission stories. He wants to collect all of those in 3-ring binders and have all of them there on the bookshelf. So there's a whole bunch of things that they're doing right now that are creating this normal world for their kids. And that has me thinking, what elements of my story do I want to make normal for my kids? I feel like I've done some of this stuff already because my wife and I have done our family core values and things like that. We've got a weekly date night and the weekly one-on-ones with my kids and things like that. And I know that they appreciate that stuff because they're old enough now that they see their friends. They don't do that sort of thing. And they still like hanging out with me, so I'm going to continue to do it as long as they're
Yep.
willing.
Take advantage while you can.
Yeah.
Yep.
But at this point, it is normal for us. And I think that's awesome because I want them to be able to do the same sort of thing with their kids. And by making it normal in our house, I feel like that sets them up for success. But I definitely want to think about that. And are there any other elements of my story that I want to make normal for my kids? And maybe there are elements that don't exist yet. Maybe there are things that are and traditions that are yet to be crafted. But I want to spend some thinking time on that.
Yeah, no, it's good. Because I know like we have some defaults that we're setting for our kids, like not making progress on Sundays, like making sure that we're taking a break, giving yourself the rest, making sure sleep is a priority. Like there's some of those things that we're trying to make sure the kids pick up, and like those go a long ways, to the point where like my oldest knows like you're not getting a phone ever, like, never. And she knows I'm joking, of course, but she also knows like it's going to be a while before you are allowed to have one of these. She's 9. And she does have a friend who has one and is starting to like become friends with some older kids who have phones and stuff. So it's interesting to see her, like whenever her friends ask her about it, like, well, my dad's the tech guy at church. And when she gets that out, they're like, oh, so you probably have, like, nope, that means I have nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Get a light phone.
Not even that. Like, no, nothing.
That's actually what we did for our 14-year-old. We got a light phone. I wrote it up actually recently for the suite setup.
I saw that.
That's a great entryway because there are text messages. There's no multimedia messages. There's no web browser. There's no apps. And we've talked to him about it. We've watched The Social Dilemma together. Like he gets it. He understands why. And he also gets annoyed by some of his teenage friends who like will come over and they just stare at their phones all the time. So I feel like, we've planted the seeds there, but we'll see.
Yep. Anyway, we could spend a whole episode on that one, but yes.
Yeah. Another thing he says here on page 117, there's lots of these little quotes that I just absolutely love.
I know. That's what I was saying earlier on. He has a lot of these like one-liner zingers here and there. Yep.
He says, this is not a book of chants you can recite to force the genie out of the bottle and grant you 3 wishes, although those books seem to sell well.
That they do.
Like, yeah. You really just, I didn't expect that statement because he is embracing what this book really is, but also slamming like every other stereotypical productivity book in this space at the same time. This is chef's kiss.
But only because he's dissing on the parts you don't like. So echo chamber going on right here. That's what that is.
That's true. That's true. However, I've been thinking a lot about this. This probably relates a little bit to StoryBrand and just like the stuff that I've been creating lately with faith-based productivity, the YouTube channel, stuff like that. I have struggled, like let's just share with the YouTube stuff specifically. I've got a whole bunch of these sermon sketchnote videos, right, that I've been doing long before I ever cared about YouTube. And I continue to do those roughly every week, and they get a handful of views, probably all people at my church. And they don't perform well, right? So I've been thinking about, as I'm getting into other types of YouTube videos, do I want to just delete all those? Do I even want to do those anymore? Because the other ones that perform well, like they reach a broader audience. But then I've just gone through Ship 30 for 30, and they basically say, become as niche as you can. You want to get to the point where people don't like you because of something that you have created. And I feel like that's the sermon sketchnote stuff for me. So I'm kind of still wrestling through this, but kind of where my mind is at right now is, no, I'm going to leave them up there because that's who I am. And if that ticks people off, good, because those aren't the people who are going to be my true fans anyways. And the internet's big enough that I'll find the people who think, oh, this is great that you do the standard productivity stuff and the sermon sketch notes and Bookworm and all this other stuff. Like there's an audience there that I can absolutely serve well. And that's what I should be trying to do, not try to be more palatable to other people or the algorithm.
Right. Right.
So yeah.
Totally fair.
The last thing I really want to talk about in this book is this topic of goal setting. Now, in chapter 12, he says, let me back up. Chapter 11, create your long-term vision, short-term goals. So that's where he starts talking about goal setting.
Yep.
However, chapter 12 was where I re-engaged with him because he says, quote, goal setting is optional. What? Did you catch that?
It's the second paragraph at the very beginning of chapter 12. I marked this in my notes. I'll just read it to you. The third and optional step in creating your life plan and experiencing a life of meaning is to fill out your goal setting worksheets.
Right.
It's right at the beginning of the chapter.
Yeah. So this just kind of sealed the deal for me that at this point, I have officially every objection I've had to Donald Miller has been disarmed. I still don't think he's all that funny sometimes, but that's just personal style, whatever. I really appreciated this statement, and this was kind of the cherry on top in terms of I've got all these principles and I'm sharing my story, and I feel like there's something here that can help you, but you don't have to do it my way. I mean, he's got goal setting templates. It would be very easy to just lean into that and be like, this is what you got to do. I shouldn't say I got to be careful with how I phrase this. The beginning of my productivity journey and the stuff that I did online, I was very much encouraged to embrace this role as the guru. And well, I've done this for a period of time, so just trust me and do it this way. And Donald Miller totally went the opposite direction here. And that's not what I expected him to do. I mean, at this point in the book, maybe, but at the beginning, I was expecting, here's the system, follow the system. And I found at this point, obviously, because I have my own issues with goals and the vacuum that they create as soon as you achieve one and all that kind of stuff. By framing it as optional, I'm like, this is my people. I am 100% on board with this message at this point. But just to tie a bow on this, the point that he's making by saying goal setting is optional is that all you really need is motivation and action. The way I wrote this down was motivation and action creates traction. Those aren't the words that he used. He does talk about narrative traction, right? But all you really need is something that will create the momentum that you need to show up and do what you need to do. And then at that point, you can chuck the rest of the system and all of the regular stuff. I still believe habits and routines are important, but he talks about the daily planning and how even that is optional. You can use it strategically whenever you need a little bit of additional focus. And this has got me rethinking a whole bunch of things.
So here's something that has crossed my mind as I've been kind of reflecting on this book, prepping for today, Mike, and I want your hot take on this, okay? Because I did not prep you for this at all. But there's a lot of times we talk about goal setting and we've belabored the negatives of goal setting or resolutions or these short-term things regularly. But at the same time, there might be a disconnect here in our own, I guess, negativity towards the term goals and setting goals, in that I think that we tend to set things called projects, and we have these short-term projects that we have that we're off to achieve. And part of me wonders if we've been in the productivity space enough to think of a goal as something else, like the concept of a SMART goal.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like the whole measurable, realistic, time-bound, like all of that. I think whenever I think of a goal, I think of that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I wonder if the broader world doesn't see it that way. And they would say that what we call a project that we're trying to accomplish here in the next month or two, take your YouTube channel, you're trying to accomplish releasing a video and just call it one video, like you've got the next one.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if people would call that a goal, and you and I would call it a project. I wonder if there's just a terminology difference there.
I think you're right. I think most people who, and when I say most people, not even like bookworm listeners, the general public, when you first stumble upon the idea of goal setting, that is the very first time you've applied any sort of intentionality to maybe to how you live your life. And you begin to live with not just for today, but for tomorrow. And so it can be very effective when you start to think that way. I think the issues I have are very much attached to the SMART goals because that is the next step. The general public, okay, so I'm going to set a goal. Now it's got to be SMART, right? Because that gives you something which is realistic to go after. However, I feel the better approach is what Donald Miller is talking about here. You begin with the end in mind. You have the eulogy. What do you want your entire story to be about? And then from there you can work backwards. I like the idea of the acts like he's talking about. And I even like the idea of the chapters. You could apply this to this analogy to your life. And I would say the projects that you're talking about, maybe those are chapters. So maybe this is like the YouTube chapter for Mike, right? But I would never, by approaching it that way, I would never set SMART goals. I would never say by this date, this chapter is going to be over and I'm going to move on to the next one. That's the issue I have with them. So it's almost like if you have never set a goal before and you stumbled on the idea of goals, fine. Okay, use them. Great. Now you have a little bit of intentionality. However, if you stick with it long enough, the better way to do this is to work backwards and to forget everything you knew about SMART goals. So yeah, I think you're right that it's the way that we describe them and the goals themselves maybe aren't necessarily bad. They just have to be framed the right way, and it's not framed the way that most people are going to think about them.
Yeah, I part of me asked that because I was looking at his worksheets for how do you set a goal and break it down and all these things when you're going to complete it by and such. And like it has that SMART goal-esque-ness of it. Like just
I noticed that.
it's reeking of that, right? But at the same time, I could easily see how taking some of the things that I call projects that have due dates on them, early on I mentioned we've got this live stream thing I'm doing on Sunday, right? Like, well, the due date for that is Sunday. Like I cannot, it's impossible for me to put that off. Outside of canceling part of the scope of the project, it's not going to move at all. So that particular project, I know some people will call it a goal. Like it's our goal to do that service well. And I just don't call it that. But I could see how taking some of his worksheets and if I applied it to that project, it actually would make sense and maybe potentially be helpful. I'm not going to do that, but that is something that I know could be helpful for some people. So anyway, I had that translation happen in my brain at some point when I was walking through the woods, and it occurred to me that like, maybe we're a little bit off, coming back to the whole mental models concept of questioning your assumptions. And I had that like, I wonder if we're off base on some of this goal angst. So I just wondered if we were off potentially and just have a different terminology. That's what I was processing.
I think maybe I need to reframe my angst. My angst is not with the whole concept of goals, but SMART goals specifically. Because one of the things that he says, which I think this is stated really well, the secret to success is to 1, work on the right things, and 2, do a little every day. And that is the essence of my issues with the goals. It's like, yeah, you can put in all the metadata and break it down into all the individual things and have all the due dates. You're still not going to do anything about it because you're not going to be motivated tomorrow, and you're going to think,
right.
Oh, I've got 3 months to do this thing, and you're going to put it off until the last possible moment, and then it's going to suck every second that you're working on it. That's what most people do.
But what you just said is an excellent reason to pick this up and go through this concept, right? Because
Yep.
that issue with like putting things off and not feeling like you have to get to it and to get it done is primarily because you're not motivated to do it ahead of time, which I think is partly why you and I get into the habits world, because then it becomes a motivation to do those things every single day, which kind of forces you into the forward progress like that mode.
Yep.
But if you go about doing that blindly without some end game in mind, it does get to be, I guess, hollow, if you will, without that substance behind it. So that's where Story Brand comes in. It gives you that substance as opposed to just finances for business, and that's where some of his write your eulogy, which to me is the big point in this book,
Yep.
that stands out, and that here's what makes a good one, here's how you do this, you should do this. The whole 10-year, 5-year, 1-year vision thing, like, sure, cool, awesome. Probably not going to do that part.
Yeah, me either.
Just going to say that. Going to skip, fast forward, plus 30 on that one. But I think that eulogy piece is the core component here. He's doing a lot of setup for it. I guess I'm kind of in the middle of wrap up here. I don't intend that. But the thing about it is that if you have that mission, if you have that drive, the habits, the routines, the day-to-day stuff, I don't want to say it becomes easy, but it's easier to get the motivation to start, I guess.
Oh, for
As
sure.
somebody who struggles with that starting point, like getting started is always the trick for me. Having that mission is the part that makes that a lot easier. Knowing that mine's a bit fuzzy from time to time, especially right now. So I'm aware of that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Really what you need is alignment, something that is pulling you towards something that is meaningful to you. Doesn't have to be something that is easy. That kind of gets into the whole idea of passion, which he doesn't address this specifically in here, but basically the whole Viktor Frankl thing, finding meaning in the suffering, while passion is suffering. The word for passion is pati, which literally means suffering. So what are you willing to suffer to see come about? And I think that is it in a nutshell. There's a whole bunch more in this book, to be honest. Chapter 14 talks about the role that matters most. That's the guide. So essentially once you've lived out your here on a mission journey, try to help other people do that. And then chapter 15 is where he kind of ties it all together. Like I said, that's the emotional part where he talks about how Lucy's not going to be there much longer, but encourages you to look for opportunities to transform. And that's the big takeaway. Start where you are with what you have. And that's how I would frame it, but keep going, keep growing, and embrace those opportunities as you see them. The last part is part 3. We don't really need to say a whole lot about this, but this is where all the templates are. So if you want to see kind of how his system works, this is where you see it all. You see the daily planner pages, you see the goal setting worksheets, you see the eulogy stuff, everything that you need in paper form.
That's too small to write on.
It's true.
Just going to say that. This part was weird to me because normally this is in an appendix. Like this is normally here, go to the appendix and get this. And he made it like part of the book, like the formal part, called it its own act. So to me, this is an introduction, a 2-act book, and an appendix, but he termed it different. So I don't know. It was weird. I think there's some marketing thing going on there, but that's.
They were like, no, you need 3 parts, and he's like, okay, fine.
I know. But the thing that's weird here is like, okay, so now you come back to the beginning of this. Like, this is where, like, I started off on a weird foot because I saw the sales pitchy thing at the beginning. And then if you follow the trajectory of this episode even, like, there's a lot of really cool things and a lot of things you can learn from what he has here. And I like a lot of stuff he has here. And then he ends me on the sales pitch thing again. Like, he brought me back to that. I had kind of forgotten about it at this point, and then he brought me back to it. I was like, oh, come on. So you started me and ended me on this sales thing, which from a business stance, I totally get it, but I just was not into that at all. So it bugged me. It really did.
Interesting.
Like, come on.
I just considered the book over after Act 2, to be honest.
I know. I wish I could have, but I couldn't let it go. For some reason, it bugged me, and I don't fully understand why. But there's something about it I just didn't care for. It left a bad taste in my mouth.
Fair enough.
Done.
Ready for action items?
Sure. It's your book. You get to go first.
All right. So my action items, I have 3 of them. One I mentioned in part 1 is to ask what if, and fill in the blank there with something that I tend to think is impossible. So dream bigger, essentially. The second one is to write my eulogy. And the third one, which is somewhat related to that, but I don't think I broke this out as a separate action item because I want this to be a separate thing. Like this is connected, but it's not necessarily the same thing. And that is the what elements of my story do I want to make normal for my kids? So does that make sense? I want this to be separate. This could manifest in the picture that you were talking about the people, the person who had written their eulogy when they were 20 and then you did the funeral when they were 50. I would imagine this sort of thing would show or could show up there. But I want this to be like a separate list sort of a thing that I can talk to my wife about. We can get an agreement about, and this is what we're going to do without telling her, hey, let's write our eulogies. I'm not sure she would embrace that action item like I would, but
give you the side eye. What are you talking about? What did you read now? What did Joe talk you into? Like that's
that's sort of the reaction I would anticipate, at least initially, till I explained it. So, what about you?
I have 2. Well, I'll call it 2.5. Because I had the one early on of setting up bookworm.fm/stats because Joshua is amazing. I'll call that a half action. The 2 that I wrote down, one is I want to write my eulogy as well. I think that's a great thing to take on. I want to amend your version of this. I want you to write it by hand first before you type it out.
Okay.
Because I think it'll be different if you write it by hand as opposed to typing it first. Just my opinion. I think you should do that. That's what I'm going to do.
All right.
The other one that I wrote down is to, like, he has, and I know you've done this with faith-based productivity, but I haven't really had any form of like a printout that I ever do for myself on a daily basis, where you have like I talk about these questions that I ask myself in the morning. I feel like I would be better off if I wrote them by hand in the morning and then transferred them. Like it's going to take me a little bit longer, like just a couple minutes longer to do that. But I think that would be a little more impactful, but would also give me a piece of paper to look at for the day's, I guess, mission, to use that term. So I need to try to create something along those lines. I've got kind of my own branding that I use for things like that, but I've never formally made my own printout for something like that. So I want to start that process. I think it's going to take me some iterations to get that right, but I at least want to start that journey there. That's my goal.
All right. So what I wrote down for your second action item there is
Yeah.
Create a daily plan type thing. Is that accurate?
A daily plan type thing. Sure, we'll call it a daily plan type thing. That's gonna be the title for it. Daily plan type thing. I'm gonna put that right at the top.
Not quite sure how else to say that. So
yeah, I don't know what it would actually be, but something. But I'm gonna call it the daily plan type thing.
All right.
Totally gonna put that at the title. You know that, right?
That works for me. All right. So style and rating. This is a tough one because of how I approached it at the beginning. I totally anticipated that this was going to be story brand for individuals and nothing more, and I was going to rip this to shreds.
Yep.
Donald Miller caught me off guard with the Viktor Frankl stuff at the beginning, and my preconceived notions of this were shattered at every turn, I feel. I really enjoyed this book. I feel like there's a lot of great stuff here. I think you and I both will not sign up for the software, but that doesn't detract at all from the book itself. I guess, if you can get past the QR codes and the sheets in Act 3, it doesn't detract from the rest of the message itself.
Yes.
It is not a sales pitch in a hardcover binding. There's a lot of really great stuff here. Even things that we have thought about, read about, studied ourselves. Like I said, I knew at the very beginning he had a planner that he was going to pitch, and I was going into it thinking, well, I've already got my planner, so no thank you. Like, I've been there, done that. I've literally created the same sort of thing that you created here, Donald Miller. There was a lot of great stuff in here, and I feel like this dotted a lot of I's, crossed a lot of T's, gave me a lot of perspective, unique perspective on a lot of different things that we had talked about. So I don't have a whole lot of negative stuff to say about it other than the style itself. Donald Miller is Donald Miller. And so there are occasionally times when his personality just kind of rubs me the wrong way, but that's just because of me. That's not him, that's me. I mentioned the jokes about the kids and the babies and things like that, and I've moved on past that. So I 100% believe that if I were to go get coffee with Donald Miller, he would be very different. Like, he would be able to read the room and be like, oh, that didn't land, and he would modify his tone. But this is a very authentic book. I feel a lot of this is based on his story. At the beginning, I thought it was a bit self-deprecating, and just based on other stuff that I've seen him, I saw him present. I've read a lot of his more recent books. I very much anticipated that was just going to be the style, and it was who he was, but it wasn't really connected to the message that he was going to be communicating, and that's not the case here. I feel like the stories that he shares, that actually it's not just a matter of preference or personal style. They are essential to the whole message of this book. It creates the authority for what he is going to be talking about. You know how we had talked about with Joshua Becker, we read, I forget, the first couple books, and then the Things That Matter was the one that was authentically him, the book that he was meant to write. I feel kind of weird saying this at this point, but I feel like this is the book that Donald Miller was meant to write.
Sure.
And maybe that's just because I'm more interested in the personal stuff than the business stuff. I'm sure he's helped a lot of businesses with StoryBrand and Business Made Simple and all that kind of stuff. But of everything that I have read by Donald Miller, this is the one that has felt the most authentic. I don't know if he's intending to shift his business and Hero on a Mission software becomes the main thing. I can't imagine that being the case, because personal stuff does not scale like business stuff does. Everybody that I know who started with personal stuff has tried to get to the point where they're working with businesses. He's kind of coming at it from the other direction. But in terms of the message, I stand by that statement that in terms of just buying a book off the shelf that Donald Miller has written, this is the best one that I have read so far. I have trouble putting it at a 5.0. I'm going to put it at 4.5 just because I feel like it is very good. And I feel like just about anybody can get something out of this one. I would recommend this to just about anyone. I've already recommended it to a bunch of people. My mastermind group is going to be writing our eulogy together whenever we get to that point, because we take turns picking the meetings, and this is totally what I'm going to make everybody do.
Nice.
But yeah, I do think there's a possibility that this could just not be for you. That's kind of what I was anticipating going into it. Was pleasantly surprised, however. I feel like this is very much on brand for the bookworm audience, and also for me personally. I can nitpick little things about specific statements that he shared here and there, but for the most part, those one-liners that he tries to manufacture because he is a good writer and understands the writing process, I feel like the majority of them landed for me. So yeah, 4.5, would recommend this.
All right. Well, I think at the very beginning, so I don't do this very often, but in my notes for this book, I sometimes will write like a pre-read rating. I'll do this once in a while. It's like just like, okay, I flipped through the book, I glanced it over, I read the table of contents, I've seen the title, I've read the accolades, I've read the back of the book. Like I've done all those how to read a book things, and I'll like, okay, what do I think this is going to come out to? And once in a while, whenever I do that, I read the book and it comes out exactly where it's at. This is a case where this might be the widest spread I've had from what I think it's going to be at the very beginning. And again, I don't do this all the time, but I did it on this one because I put down this might be a 1.0 book is what I wrote in my notes here.
I think that's fair at the beginning.
Yeah, I was like, this is not going to go well. So when I started the book, my assumption was I was going to have a 1.0 book because I assumed the entire book was a sales pitch. The whole thing was going to be trying to get me to buy something. He was going to give me a system I didn't want to do. He was going to ask me to do some stuff I think are hokey. Like, these are all the expectations I had coming into this book. Now, as he started in the introduction, I pretty much thought that's where I was going to get until we got to that point where I had to go grab some tea, and he mentioned Viktor Frankl. And I think at that point, I don't think I had quite the turnaround at that point as what you did. It just caused me pause because at that particular point, it's like, okay, he's either going to make me angry that he used Viktor Frankl to try to get me on board, or he's going to nail this. It's going to be one of those two, and I don't think there's much in between. And I think he did nail it with his use of Viktor Frankl's credibility. I think he did really well with that. He spent the rest of the next act and a half or so, kind of redeeming himself from my beginning expectations. And it came a very long way from that, which you can kind of see. Again, you can see the trajectory of this in even the Bookworm episode here. And I think there's a lot of these like one paragraph, one line comments that come out that are like, yeah, you absolutely nailed it. You made me think about that differently. And at this point, when you've read this many self-help business nonfiction books, like you get one tidbit out of it and it was worth the read, right? So with this one, I think there's more than that. There's definitely more than, one or two tidbits that you can pull from this. Obviously, writing your eulogy, I've seen the benefits of that firsthand, and yet I've not done anything with it, and he's prompted me to act on that. So it came a very long way. I don't think he ended on a very good note with me because he brought me all the way back where I started. And it's like, oh, come on. Why did you have to do that? Like, just call it an appendix. Don't do that thing. Don't do the business thing. I was with you. So anyway, I don't know why I've got that beef there. So I don't think I'm going to go to the 4.5 with you, but I will go to 4.0 on it. I feel like that's a good place for it to land just because I think that there's a ton of value in this middle section here. Again, I'm not doing this whole 10-5 1-year vision thing. I've done those sorts of things before, and I feel like I spend more time trying to create those than I ever spend working towards them. So I don't know what that is. Maybe that's me, maybe my fault. I'm just the wrong person for this. Wrong brain, not sure what that is. But I am grateful for having gone through this. I don't know if this is like the book he was meant to write. I don't know if I would go that far with you. But I do think this is one that if you haven't put together a mission, you haven't found what that is, I feel like this is a really good book to pick up to help you figure that out. Like there's a lot of material and self-help type things out there. Mike has some good stuff. So like there's a lot of this stuff out there. But this is a great place to start for sure, I think. So definitely going to recommend it to a handful of folks that I know could go through this. So yes, write a eulogy, pick this up, read it, do it.
All right. So let's put Hero on a Mission on the shelf. What's next, Joe?
Coming up next is a book that officially released 2 days ago. You could get your hands on it 2 days ago, I think. 1 day ago, something like that. Yep. Anyway, you could pre-order it for quite a while. Building a Second Brain by Tiago Forte. This thing's been hitting all sorts of charts on the Amazon lists. It's been all over the place. I know you had a pre-release version, have been through it, and I've seen your sketch notes on it. So Super excited to go through this. I've not had a chance to start it. I'm itching to get my hands on it and go through it. So very high expectations at this point. And I think we know how expectations can frame your view of a book at this point. So that's either a good thing or a bad thing. We'll see how it lives up.
All right. I have a book after that, which you probably never heard of.
Oh boy.
It is called Love and Work by Marcus Buckingham. Now, context here. I signed up for, during COVID, John Maxwell has these Live to Lead conferences, and they were forced to go virtual. And so they sold a virtual pass for like $50 or something one year. So I signed up for it. And they had basically John Maxwell and a handful of the speakers in a room of like 20 people presenting on a stage for the video. And I watched the videos from that conference, and Marcus Buckingham blew me away.
Okay.
And this book came out just a couple of months ago, but the subtitle is How to Find What You love what you do, and do it for the rest of your life. And the very first line in the Amazon description, you've long been told to do what you love. Sounds simple, right? So you can kind of see like he's going to blow up this myth, right?
Okay.
And I feel like this is a great follow up to Hero on a Mission. I haven't read it yet, so I don't know exactly what to expect here, other than I've heard Marcus Buckingham present before, and he was a very engaging speaker. So that's what we're doing next.
Okay. That sounds exciting, I think. I don't know. I feel like the whole do what you love thing has always been kind of hokey, but to find a book that's going to take it on, I'm game. At least I think that's what's going on. Expectations.
I think that's what's going on. We'll find out.
Super fun. Super fun. I don't have a Gap book this time around.
All right.
You?
No, I was just about to ask. I do not have any Gap books. I have a whole bunch of books that I keep intending to read as Gap books. I thought I was going to crank through this Donald Miller one super fast, but he gave me a lot to chew on.
I wasn't sure what that was. Okay, I thank you for saying that, because I feel like this was one that I thought, I was the same way. I thought this was like a 5-day read, 4-day read or something. And then I took the whole 2 weeks on it. It's like, huh.
Yep.
Maybe I don't know. There's something there.
It's a good one though. I mentioned
true.
the MindNode file. I'm going to get that posted right after we record here, but that is one of the perks of becoming a Bookworm Club premium member. If you go to bookworm.fm/membership, you can sign up $5 a month, $50 a year. You get access to all my MindNode files. I upload them as PDF files and also actually MindNode files. That's the app that I use to make them, so you can edit them yourself. There's also some Gap Book episodes that Joe created back in the day. There is a Bookworm 4K wallpaper that you can download and put on your devices. But that is the way to support the show. For the people who are willing to do that, give us a couple bucks a month to help us keep the lights on, buy the books, etc. We really appreciate it.
And we really, really, really appreciate those of you who read along with us. So if you are one of those really great people, pick up Building a Second Brain by Tiago Forte. We'll cover that with you in a couple of weeks.